Welcome to the Blueprint for Men podcast. We are so glad that you have tuned in with us today. We are continuing in our series in March on the core strengths of a man, and that is the physical strength of a man, the physical aspect of a guy. And this week we are interviewing another friend of Marty's, a guy named Keven Burdorf. And we've been having a great conversation before we hit record. So I thought, why don't we just hit record now so we can start talking and get some of this down. So it's been a good conversation already. So Keven is he describes himself as a wellness coach and along with a fitness background. And so he's going to come to us from that perspective. And as I double checked with Marty, there's nothing particularly new to share in terms of announcements and things going on with events with Blueprint as of right now. I know Marty's traveling this weekend. Who knows if they'll hear this podcast eventually down there in Florida, but we welcome you, Keven, and we want to get into this conversation about wellness from your perspective. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike, Marty. Always a pleasure. I know that in the past, whenever I've had a chance to be able to either meet up with Blueprint for Men at an event, or even if that's just jumping on a call with Marty, it is always just a fantastic conversation. And I never really know where it's going to go, and it always ends up ending me up in a better place. So I'm very, very excited for the opportunity to be on this podcast and to share a little bit of my story, but then also just kind of see where it leads.
Well, Kevin, it's good to have you here. I've known you for a number of years, and you're a high-energy guy. I always enjoy talking with you. Our most recent opportunity to have some good time was up hiking on Mount LeConte just at the beginning of the year on January 1. Yeah. That was great, wasn't it?
That was great. It was a phenomenal way up and down. I feel like there wasn't a single repeat that entire trip. Everything was new about it. It was very cool.
Yeah, and then they end up at that Mexican restaurant and just, that was just, it was a great day. I was hurting pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anyway, but, you go on a 14-mile hike in the snow and rough terrain. You get a little beat up unless you're one of those guys that's super, super fit and does it all the time.
Yeah, which I wish that I could pretend that I wasn't sore after that, like it was no big deal. But yeah, I was definitely hobbling around. My legs were very sore after that trip. So,
and Mike is in Colorado, and he's done how many peaks have you done out there?
I've hiked 26 different 14ers with a few repeats.
Nice.
And I know that feeling of your legs feel like jelly the next day after you. I remember going to work on a Monday after hiking over the weekend, and I try to walk the stairs. I'm like, I think I'm going to fall down these stairs because your legs are just so tired.
Yeah. Well, it's a good segue into our topic about men's health, wellness. I myself, I'm getting older. There's no denying it. I still try to stay active, but I hate to admit it. I'm really at the computer way more than I'd like. But there is something that I feel still as I'm older when I am fit. It just feels different. And so, guys, that's where we're going to be going in this conversation, is really learning some tips and in ways that all of us as guys can respond to this challenge of staying fit for a lifetime. It's not just about living a long life. It's living a quality life. I mean, medical care has gotten better and we can extend the life of people, but far better to not have that medical care and live a quality life, right? Yeah. A lot less expensive and a lot more enjoyable. So I think that, to me, is the heart of why we're going where we're going this month on men's health and wellness. So, Keven, I just want to get into it. We like to go kind of into the personal side right away, because everybody's got a story to why they do what they do, who they are, connecting with God, family, all these things. And so we're going to kind of delve into some of those kind of things. So let me ask you, Keven, going back to just your family right now, tell us a little bit about where you're at, what you're doing, family dynamics, that kind of things that are going on that are really good, maybe a challenge or two. But then we're going to go to your past, your childhood, and what made you Keven Burdorf, okay?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Let's just start with where you're at right now. Give us kind of some highlights.
So right now I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, with my wife and my two daughters. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old daughter. And I currently have 2 full-time jobs. One of them is to take care of my kids. I stay at home and I watch the girls. And the other full-time job is I am a wellness coach. I'm a virtual wellness coach. I basically do my entire job online. I started an online business this past September is when I filed for my LLC. And I have been starting to grow that business over the past several months. This has kind of been an idea that I have never really thought to make a reality, and God really kind of opened the door for that to become a reality so that I could stay home with my girls. I have been in the fitness space for over a decade. It would have been 11 years in April here in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was doing personal training, corporate wellness, some nutrition coaching, and I put that behind me when I got the chance to be able to be at home with my girls. It's been very rewarding, but a very big challenge. I like people, and I like being out of the house, and I like being really, energized and getting in front of people. And so doing things virtually has been a little bit of a challenge. However, I found it very, very rewarding. It's just different, I also am very blessed to be able to spend as much time and have as much flexibility as I do, simply because you mentioned the good and the bad, right? Just recently had a medical issue with my youngest daughter. So a couple weeks ago, my wife and I were both at home, and my youngest daughter had a seizure, which as a personal trainer, I'm exposed to a lot of stuff in a gym. And so I had a little bit of a background in what to do if a client or somebody has some sort of an issue in the gym while you're working out with them. So I feel like I was somewhat prepared, but I don't think anyone really prepares you for that type of something with your 1-year-old child just out of the blue. So we ended up having to take her to Children's Hospital, spent the night there for observation. Thankfully, they didn't find anything as of yet. We have some more testing coming up in the next couple of weeks to see if there's any sort of underlying seizure issues or anything coming back in her blood work. But as of right now, she seems to be completely normal. It's just kind of one of those wait and see kind of games, which I can tell you is still extremely stressful, right? I spent about a week sleeping in a chair in her room just to make sure that I was within arm's reach if something happened. A lot of stress. But all that being said, God has really blessed. So that's kind of where we sit right now.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, as you were talking about your daughter being a young child, you just assume a child is born and they're going to have a normal life and not going to have any problems. But every second of our life, our heart has got to beat. We've got to breathe.
Yeah.
The brain has to fire in the right sequence. All of these things that God created to just happen are in themselves. This is the interesting thing. We think of miracles in the standpoint of something that is out of the norm. But if we really think about the impossibility of everything that's going on every second of our life, we are living miracles. We are machines that are unbelievable. The more you study about the body, the mind, it just is staggering. And so to delve into it from a standpoint of, hey, I'm going to help people maximize their health so they can have the best life possible. How did you, going back to your childhood, how did you get here? I mean, Keven Burdorf, you have a childhood, you had a family, this pathway to getting to where this is what I feel like God's calling me to do. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I was born and raised in central Minnesota. My dad was a organic farmer. Him and his brother kind of co-farmed. They both had organic farms right across the road from each other. Each had about 80 acres worth of land. And he had dairy cattle and, we did cash crops and stuff like that. This massive garden right outside. And I feel like the way that most millennials right now wish what they could do, like move out into the country and have chickens and grow their own food and, do the sourdough bread. Like that's where I hail from. Right. And without even realizing it, like that was kind of like my anchor, my past, like growing up. By the time I was about ready to go to school, so I'm going to say a first grader, things weren't going very well with the farm. My dad had to get rid of the dairy cattle because only having 60 head of dairy wasn't really profitable enough. It was too much work. And then by the time I was a fourth grader, fifth grader, somewhere in that range, the same thing happened with the farm. It wasn't a big enough production to be able to turn a profit any longer. And so I had been homeschooled up until that point. I was running around outside. We were doing farm to table food. Both my parents were working and living at home. And so by the time I was fourth, fifth grade, that abruptly ended. Both my parents took jobs outside of the home. We were commuting 30 minutes one way to get to work and to school. So lifestyle basically went from the ideal to the not so ideal. Everything became very processed because it was cheaper and easier to be able to make and eat. We were eating fast food for lunches and pre-made meals for lunches and things that weren't necessarily the greatest, but it was just because that's what was easy and what was available. And rapid change. So by the time I was a freshman in high school, I was already over 250 some pounds. I remember my freshman year, I went to Maplewood Academy in Minnesota. So I was in the dorm, and because I couldn't be a village kid, I had to be where all the kids were. So the dorm was where I needed to be. And we had this, I'm trying to remember the name of the event. They always had these funny little themes for their, like their banquets or whatever. And I want to say it was like the hobo banquet. So we all dressed up, we went over to the Good Samaritan Center and got clothes and dressed up like hobos or whatever. And I had a pair of corduroy pants that I got that were like a 44. And I remember that. I remember that size very, very vividly, being like, how is this the pair of pants that I'm going to be throwing on? I'm a freshman in high school. There was a period of time, I basically broke a bone every year for 5 years, from grade school into high school, because I'm trying to keep up with all of my friends. And I'm trying to do all this really heavy athletic stuff, but I'm extremely overweight, and I can't move and I can't keep up like all the other kids. And by the time I'm a sophomore in high school, I'd had enough. I was like, there's got to be some sort of a change. I got to do something. One of my mentors, at the time, he was our chaplain. He was our Bible teacher. And he was also the gymnastics coach. He's like, hey, you're a farm kid. He's like, you don't need to be super athletic. You just need to stand there and we need to put people on you. Come do gymnastics with us. And so he introduced me to Acro Sport gymnastics. And that was kind of the spark that I needed. It gave me an identity, and it gave people that I could support, and it gave me something to do. I've never been good by myself, never been good alone. I needed other people in order to be able to feel healthy and feel like I could do something or give back, or have something greater than myself to like give into. And that kind of started my fitness journey. I started running, I started eating better, I was working out with the team, started doing something that was more active, and I felt like that was kind of the spark that took me into being active. Got to college and kind of had this. Now that I'm in college, I'm going to figure out who I really am kind of a moment. And so I kind of got rid of everything that was who I was in academy. I think that was also kind of forced. I would probably say 80% of graduates from Maplewood Academy go to Union College. And so I was set to go to Union College. I was like, I'm going to know who my roommate is. I already figured out my major. I was going to do business down there, and I had everything figured out. And God said, nope, you're going to go to Andrews University. And I was like, no, I'm not. I was like, why would I go to Andrews? Like, none of my class is going there. Like, that just seems so lame. Like Michigan, like, why would I want to go to Michigan? Well, I went to Andrews because when God opens that door and he speaks to you, it doesn't matter what you're thinking. Like, that's where you're going to go. And my freshman year, my first semester, I had barely a 2.0 grade point average. I could not, I really didn't like my major. I didn't, everything was going wrong for me that first semester. And I'm just trying to figure out, I'm just swimming. A lot of things were happening in that time of my life. And again, God put some mentors into my life. The RAs that were in my dorm, I made a couple friends. They were brothers, and the two of them you used to do Acro Sport gymnastics in high school. I was like, yeah. And they're like, we're having tryouts for second semester and we need some more guys. So the same thing, right? The same thing that got me moving in a direction when I was in high school was now the thing that got me moving the right direction when I was in college. So two people and two organizations that I attribute to my success. Number one, the Andrews University Gymnastics and Coach Christian Lighthall. They put me onto the team, and that completely altered my life because that gave me, again, a team and a family that I could kind of, to work around and grow with. But then the other part of that was the RA team. So I was an RA in the Andrews dorm for 3 years. And Dean Carter was the head dean there, and he had a couple other deans and all the RA team there, and they taught discipline and integrity, and what it was like to be around a group of committed men who you can talk to, and it's not about excuses. It's about coming to the men when you have a problem, always making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you make a mistake, you own up to it and you figure out the right path forward from there. Both of those programs completely changed my life and made me the man that I am today. So I still hadn't found fitness yet. There's fitness in both of those. But surprisingly, as a fitness professional now, I've never really been drawn to exercise traditionally. I like being outside. I like moving. Love Acro Sport gymnastics. But just going to the gym and lifting weights was never my thing. So one of my friends on Andrews Gymnastics, she asked me, she's like, hey, you ever thought about working at a summer camp? I was like, no, I don't want to work at a summer camp. I've never wanted to work at a summer camp, actually. The summer camp, not to cast shade on the summer camp in Minnesota, but the reputation when I was in high school for the kids that go work at that particular summer camp it wasn't about the kids. It wasn't about giving back. It wasn't about going and finding that spiritual section. It was, you get to go play on a boat. You get to go play with your friends. And that was it. And I was like, I don't really want any part of that. Well, needless to say, God wanted me to go to work at a summer camp. And so she twisted my arm very, very heavily. And I found myself at Camp Wakanda in Wisconsin. And it was a very surreal moment for me. I showed up at this place that I had never been to with people that I did not know. And within the first 5 minutes of like, what am I doing here? Like, I have no idea why I'm here. And I was introduced to Pastor Mike Edge. He was the camp director. And some of you may know Pastor Mike Edge. He retired from the Wisconsin Conference after being president of the Wisconsin Conference. And he actually moved down near the Chattanooga area for several years before he unfortunately passed. But he was a man among men. He was such a pillar. And the way that he leads, I'm going to give you a little background about how he directed camp. I asked him how he found his people, and he's like, I never went looking. He's like, God always sent the people that I needed. He's like, I didn't have a number of how many people I needed at camp. God was always going to give me the exact number that I needed for that year. And he just had that faith and that trust that God was going to do that. And every year, I worked there for 3 years, 2 of them being underneath Pastor Mike Edge's directorship. And both of those years were completely life-changing for me. He just understood how to lead in a way that most leaders didn't. He saw me for who I was, and he gave me the opportunity to step out of my comfort zone and become the person that God knew that I could be. And so I get a little emotional when I talk about Pastor Mike. He was an extremely good friend of mine, and he really put a lot of time and energy into me. And I think that I am the man that I am today because a lot because of those interactions with him. So that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am. Now, this is all important about the exercise portion because I was a business major when I first started college. While I was at Camp Wakanda, one of my really good friends, Cade Wilkinson, got a crush injury on his hand. They were moving a boat with a forklift and chains on the boat and ended up getting his hand caught between the forklift and the chain. It was no bueno. But because of my background in gymnastics, I understood how to be able to tape and splint and do things like that. And so I kind of helped him with his hand. Well, that kind of sparked an interest in me. And I thought, maybe it's time for me to change my major into something I was passionate about. I switched my major to pre-physical therapy. And that basically put me on the fast track into pre-physical therapy and exercise science. After 3 years of pre-physical therapy, you sign up to get into the Andrews Physical Therapy School. Because I transferred into that, I didn't make the first cut into the school. So that means I had another year to wait. So I graduated with an exercise science degree from Andrews, which basically meant my 4th year was all about personal training, exercise science, exercise physiology, nutrition. So I did that for a year and graduated. Well, then I had a choice. My girlfriend at the time just graduated with her master's in architecture. She got a job working in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I could apply to physical therapy school and be at Andrews for another several years while she is in Tennessee, or I could move down to Tennessee, start working as a personal trainer, and then figure out the whole pre-physical therapy, physical therapy thing school later. So I didn't like being alone. And so I decided to kick the PT school down the road. I moved down to Tennessee, and I started working as a personal trainer for a phenomenal company, Performance Training Incorporated. And I worked there continually up until this last December, where I turned in my resignation.
So how many years was that, Kevin? How many years were you with them?
It was 10 years. 10 years.
So
it would have been 11 years this April.
Okay. So you've been in this fitness sector for 10 plus years.
Yes, sir.
And so right now you're 33, 4?
Oh, thank you. Flattery will get you everywhere, Marty. 36.
36. Okay. Well, yeah, you are much younger than Mike and I, but that's good. That's why we have you here, because we like to get, younger guys and older guys. We've all got something to share, but that's an interesting pathway. So really your physical therapy ambition just kind of like you just left it there.
I just kind of left it there. One of the jobs that I did kind of in the interim to kind of, pay rent. I was working as a personal trainer, and then this is when I was still living in Michigan. I also started working for a corporate wellness company that had a contract with Honeywell in South Bend, Indiana. And they exposed me to how corporate wellness and corporate fitness was run, what it looked like. When I moved down here to Knoxville, so this was 2013, and there was really nothing going on in the economy in 2013. People were not spending their money on personal training. My company started looking for other avenues. Performance training was looking for other avenues to make money, and they just kind of stumbled upon a corporate wellness contract. And they were doing a good job with it. But I needed a way to make money, and personal training wasn't, there just wasn't a lot of clients. So I approached the director of corporate wellness at the time, and I said, hey, I've had some experience with this. I think that there's some things that I can do to help you all improve what you're doing. They were gracious to pay me more for the knowledge that I had. And the rest was history. Within a few years, I was promoted to lead coordinator of corporate wellness. And so I was working full time, helping them write their corporate wellness programs, direct a lot of their corporate wellness facilities. We were able to go out and get more contracts than just the one contract that they had. After probably 5 or 6 years after working there, I think we had 5 corporate wellness contracts. And from the one that it started with when I was working there. So that just turned into my full-time position. And I was very happy with it. I still wonder if physical therapy is still a route that I will go. I don't know. I don't know if it's something that I'm going to pursue or not. It just hasn't been, that opportunity has not presented itself as something where I really feel like God's pushing me through that door or opening it for me. Right. But it's still definitely on the table.
Yeah. I don't know, Mike, you have anything you want to jump in? If not, I'll go down another pathway here, but what do you got?
Well, you might be going down this path, Marty, but I'm curious, I heard you say it was very clear to you that God was leading you not to Union, but to Andrews, and also to Camp Wakanda, which I have a kind of a history with summer camp back when I was a pastor in Wisconsin. I don't know if you heard this while you were there, but that town became like the biggest town in almost all of it was the county, I think, at the time when they had their the camp meeting.
Oh yeah.
And it was so fun. I had so much fun, probably because I worked with the junior tent, which these kids, the way I've told it through the years, these kids are old enough to be coordinated and still young enough to still want to participate and play in sports, so it wasn't chaos. So I had so much fun working in the junior tent. Those two camp meetings, I enjoyed those a lot. Anyway, that's my story with Camp Wakanda in that sense. When I lived down there,
I love the verbiage, the junior tent.
Yes.
For anyone who has never experienced a true camp meeting. And yes. You know what? I have not been back to Camp Wakanda now. I mean, probably 8 years or 9 years since the last time I was there. So they may have completely changed the way that they do it now. But they actually would set up tents like the old school camp meetings. They had just erected a physical adult meeting shelter. So they had this huge, big building pavilion now with, actual audio but previously to that, they used to put in a big adult tent, for camp meeting. And so, we put these big, would look like big circus tents up, and one of them were for the little kids and one was for the, all over camp. And so I want to say that, we were the biggest fire department for that week. They had, they had all these different pastors and camp staff that all were trained. This is what's going to happen. And this is where you go if there's a fire. And, it was very, very cool. If you've never experienced a Camp Wakanda camp meeting, I highly suggest it. It was always a blast.
It's a unique experience in the Adventist world. It's like throwback. It was a junior tent where I announced my wife was pregnant with our second, Brandon. I still remember the kids, they almost tore the roof off with the cheering. It was so funny.
That's so cool.
That's not even why I had what the questions I had for you. I wanted to ask you, you heard God clearly bring you to the camp, and clearly bring you to the camp and Andrews. I'm curious if you heard God clearly call you from being employed or being a personal trainer into this wellness world that you're in now as your own LLC. Is that just as clear for you, or was that just as clear?
So that's a fantastic question. I feel like this is kind of a Jonah moment for me. About 3-4 years after working with performance training, it became very apparent to me. So this would probably be 2016, 2017, somewhere in there, that I did not know what I needed to know. I felt like I was not able to do my job efficiently or effectively. I needed more information and knowledge to run with. I'm the type of person who just hits the ground running and I figure it out as I go along. My weakness is long-term planning, but my strength is you throw me into the chaos and I'm going to make it work. I was very, very good at just working with whatever was on the table for me and just making it work. And so after doing everything that I possibly could with the small amount of knowledge that I had, for corporate wellness, for personal training, for all of it, I felt like I needed more. So I started seeking other professional help. So there was this really cool, organization that started up. They did a kind of like a weekend event called FitCon. It was in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it was for fitness and nutrition professionals. And it was kind of like, hey, they're like, come on out. We're going to do this big expo. But their hook wasn't just the expo. They're like, well, if you sign up, we're going to have these presenters who are some of the top people within, currently some of the best personal trainers, some of the best nutrition coaches, some of the best strength and conditioning coaches that that were in the U.S. Well, they were going to come and give like this little talk, and you'd have like this extra access to listen to them and ask questions. So like, oh, well, this is really cool. This is exactly what I needed. So went to Salt Lake City, Utah, and in the middle of one of these sessions, I'm talking with the presenter at the time, and basically, I honestly don't remember the question that I asked, but the presenter, looks at me and he's like, "Do you work for somebody else, or do you work for yourself?" I'm like, "Oh, I work for a company." And he basically just looked at me right in the eyes, and he's like, "You will not, you're not going to feel like you're successful, and you're not going to have peace until you quit your job." And I was like, it was one of those things where, it just smacks you across the face. And he's like, listen, he's like, you need to call your boss and tell him that you're going to quit and you need to go work for yourself. And he's like, because the question that you're asking is not someone who is looking to work for somebody else. It's someone who is looking to do their best, and you're not going to be able to do that underneath someone's shadow. And
this is 2016, you said?
Yeah, this is like 2016, 2017. And I was like, well, I can't, in the back of my head, I'm like, I can't quit my job. I can't do it. And it was in the back of my mind since then that it's like, I'm not going to find what I'm looking for, and I'm not going to be able to do what I need until I quit my job. And the next couple of years, I tried to avoid it.
So you agreed with him, though. When he said it, it was like, yeah, you're telling me a truth, but my reality is not right now.
Yep. I was like, I don't see a path of how I could possibly quit my job, make a living. It just didn't seem like the right thing to do. I'm a fiercely loyal person. And I will tell you that I'm very loyal to my boss, my previous boss. She has created a company that is flourishing. When a little side story about Performance Training Incorporated, when COVID hit, almost every other small fitness business shuttered their doors because, how are you supposed to stay open?
The brick and mortar ones.
Yeah, correctly. Yeah, correct. We had all of our corporate partners that we were in charge of all their corporate stuff. We couldn't do anything in person any longer. We had to learn how to do everything virtually. And so it was just kind of the writing was on the wall. We were all like, well, no one's going to pay for in-person personal training and in-person classes. And so we're like, well, there goes our job, right? Within a week, our boss calls everybody together and she's like, I'm not firing anybody. She's like, here's what's going to happen. She's like, I'm going to take whatever you all turned in. And she's talking to personal trainers. They get paid for the hours that they do personal training with. I had the blessing of being a salaried employee, but the majority of everyone else that was on the payroll, they're just personal trainers. They're not on a salary position. She made the commitment, whatever they made on this last payroll, she was going to keep paying them until we were able to open up again. And she gave us opportunities to work for the company from home. So we did challenges and we made videos and we started working on some sort of like an app that we could, start doing virtual stuff with our clients. We started figuring out how to be able to work outdoors and create spacing so that we could still do some sort of classes. But she refused to lay any of her employees off through that entire thing because she's like, you all have mouths to feed. You guys have to make a living. And she's like, I'm not going to let you guys down because it's my responsibility to take care of you.
Wow.
So phenomenal person, phenomenal company. Like that's who she is and the type of company that she has built. And
that then made it harder for you to consider this.
I strongly rejected the idea that I should walk away from her and that company. So even though I felt like it was the truth, like, the only way forward for me as a person is if I need to cut ties and I need to start doing my own thing. I just had a really hard time doing it. So it took me almost 5 years to get to the point of where I was ready to say, this is the best thing for me. Yeah.
So that was a
And
completely
I
different
thankfully-
process than that you had of like, it wasn't like God saying, slap you across the face, this is where you're going. You had to go through discernment and weighing things out. And I think guys relate to that. I've had both experiences. It was clear God's leading me this way. And then things weren't so clear, but I felt like I'm still being, led. And this is my current like calling with men's ministry. But
Yeah.
so I think guys can relate to that, because when you're in that place of some ambiguity and you feel this unsettledness, and yet, my reality around me is not telling me that I can make this decision just yet, or maybe it feels like a pipe dream of some kind, That's why I asked. I just wanted to see, if you had this difference. And I think on the other side of making that decision and following through with it, we'll know if it's the best decision if you have that peace of mind, I guess, and maybe not success right away, perhaps, because that's not been my story of just immediate success. But there is definitely peace of mind, and I feel very clear that this is where I'm supposed to be right now. I don't know if that's been your experience already since last year or not, but
I'm really glad that you asked the question, and I'm glad you brought this up. I think that there's two levels to success, right? You're talking about that feeling of peace, and then there's what we see of what success is within the world, right? Like lots of money and lots of attention and lots of fame. I have not experienced the latter, right? When you're building something from scratch, especially something like the fitness and wellness business, until you've gotten a reputation that's out there long enough, my reach is very small. And plus, this is something that I'm very grateful for. Although I've lived in Knoxville now for 10 years, the majority of my sphere of influence is still underneath Performance Training Incorporated. Almost everyone I've met has been under Performance Training's umbrella, and phenomenal people. I've met so many wonderful people, clients and corporate contacts, and Performance Training and I have separated on very, very good terms. And so I've tried to work very hard to not step on toes and make it seem like I'm trying to steal people that I met from them. And I want to see them succeed, and thankfully they want to see me succeed. And so I'm trying to do this in a way that is good for both of us, both of our companies, and hopefully we're able to work well together later in the same space. So it's very slow, which is very stressful, right? Whenever you step out, you're taking this huge risk, and you're like, you're not seeing a whole lot of money come in. And but on the other side of that, I can tell you that I feel very at peace with the decision that I have made. I have 2 clients right now that I'm working with, and I've been working with them since December. And already the progress that they have been making and the conversations that we have, they have given me back some really great feedback, and the affirmation they've been giving me about how my coaching has already changed and adapted the way that they're doing their lifestyle. It's completely rewarding. So I know that this is the path that God has put me on. I feel very, very good about it and at peace with it. The patience of waiting until it grows into an actual, what other people would look at and say is successful, that's a whole level of patience that I am praying that God gives me, because I don't have it.
That's a dangerous prayer you got right there.
It's just that waiting game. So
yep. It's hard to pray for patience.
Yeah. Rarely does any thing worthwhile happen quickly, though.
Yes.
So
yep.
It's okay, Keven, and I admire the tenacity. I think that's something that God always rewards, is he gives a calling on your life. And it doesn't matter what it is. You could feel like, you're supposed to be a mechanic and you're going to do good quality. We need people in every sector. And yet if you stick out your neck on your own, like if you were a mechanic, you're working on cars, not bodies,
right.
It's going to take you a while to set up a shop and get all your tools and start getting your customers. And it just takes time for all these things. And I think that in your story is a message to every one of us as men is, don't be afraid to take chances. the timing is never perfect. It's like your children, you know. If you would have continued to wait till it was perfect timing to have your children, you probably never would, right? So
For sure.
you just jump into it Keven Burdorf style, and you're going to figure it out as you go. That's life. But hey, I want to, in the last part of our podcast interview here, I really want to get into some specific stuff. I always like giving specific information and tools in whatever way we can here. But I don't know exactly where to jump in, but, you know, just with our background in the Adventist denomination, wellness, health is a big deal, and it has been for a long, long time. And that's a real beautiful, beautiful thing. One of the teaching tools that has been around for quite a few decades now, you know, something like New Start. It's a framework for thinking about, you know, holistic health, you know, New Start. We could go through, I was just kind of reminding myself, nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, trust in God, you know, these 8 principles of healthful living. And, you know, as a wellness coach, a fitness trainer and all that, what kind of frameworks are you using? And what do you see as some good tools that help guys think about their health and keep a balanced picture in front of them, what they need to be about?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for the question, Marty. I have 2 frameworks that I'm using. The first one is an entry point that the majority of my client base is looking for, and they get the most amount of traction with wherever they might be, whether that's weight loss, whether that's trying to find energy, whether that's they're trying to keep up with their kids, whatever that might be. And that framework is sleep, stress, and recovery. The most important thing for almost everyone across the board, whether they're a teenager, you know, just trying to keep, you know, most teenagers are in that spot where they're still having high levels of developing growth, but then they're also dealing with school. And then they're also probably doing some sort of extracurricular activities as well. Well, if they're not getting quality sleep, they're already trying to operate all of those things from a deficit. Maybe they're college or, you know, just getting out of college, they're chasing after a career. Well, now they're also in that stage of where, well, what are they going to burn? They're going to burn their sleep because they want to have a social life, and they want and need to be able to make a living and make money. Most young professionals find themselves in that spot. And then the spot that I'm in right now, I've got 2 kids. One of them's 1 year old. Their sleep schedules are all over the place. But then, you know, you've got a house you got to take care of. You got a job. You've got all these things. Well, what's the one thing that you're not going to be able to deal with? Well, I'll just sleep later, right? What's that term? I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? That's kind of what most of us guys need.
Dear.
I don't need sleep. And that's the first thing that tends to get thrown under the bus. Well, without sleep, without enough sleep, your brain does not function well enough. It can't think. You get this idea of brain fog. But it's even more than that. If you don't get enough sleep, it has a hard time telling your body what to do. It has a hard time being able to read the information coming back in from the rest of your body. Your reaction time goes down. Your body's ability to be able to heal and regenerate itself goes down significantly. And so one of the biggest things that you can do for your health, whether that's right now or whether you're trying to have health long term, the term, you know, within the fitness industry would be longevity, is sleep. If you can get anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of sleep, somewhere in that range, some people need a little bit less, some people a little bit more. I want to say the average time is around 7 hours. But if you can nail that every night, you're already miles ahead of the competition, as it were. Stress is the next one of that framework. Stress can be actual stress, like a physical stress, or it can be perceived stress, so an emotional stress. Our bodies and our brains have a hard time differentiating between the two. So you could be sitting down in an office in front of a computer screen, working on a task that is zero physical stress, but the perceived pressure of that task, maybe it's You're up against a really, really hard deadline. The task you've been asked to complete, you don't have enough time and resources to be able to do. Your boss is really, hey, you really got to get this thing done. And you're not going to be able to get it done with a high amount of quality. And so your perceived stress is like you're running through the woods and there's a bear chasing you. You're having the same reaction, but you're sitting down in front of a computer screen. If you have a really poor background in recognizing stress and also how you cope to that stress, some negative coping mechanisms for stress is we just ignore it. Like, oh, I'm not stressed. Just because I'm sweating through my shirt right now. I'm just a sweater. No, you're not. You're stressed out. Recognize that. You're not sleeping well because you're sitting there and you're processing, you can't deal with all the stuff that's going on, what you've got coming tomorrow, what just happened today, because you don't cope with those emotions. You just bury them like most men do. We bury these stressors. We want to ignore them. So we have bad coping skills and we choose to ignore the signs of that stress. It usually ends up in a pretty bad way. One of the things that I learned so I have a certification in sleep, stress, and recovery from a company called Precision Nutrition. One of the things they talk about within the first couple chapters of learning about your body's response to stress is that if you ignore it long enough, stress will manifest itself physically in some way, whether that's insomnia, whether that's some sort of a chronic condition. Your body will break down. If you're mentally strong enough to just ignore the stress, your body will break. It's just a matter of time. I think that's probably why we see so many men in their mid to late 30s ending up in the emergency room, ending up with all these weird random illnesses. Marty knows this about me. Probably 3 years ago now, I ended up having a 5-day hospital stay. So I was still doing personal training. I was still very healthy. We had just had my first daughter. So she was a little bit over a year old, somewhere between a year and a half. I do Spartan races. I love obstacle course racing. So I'm training for, I don't remember what the distance was. I had just finished a Spartan beast in Fayetteville. So this was, a beast is about a half marathon distance. So I had just finished that several weeks previous. I was in pretty good shape. And I wake up in the middle of the night, not understanding what's going on. My body is in what I now know full rigors. My body was going into sepsis. And I am a healthy 33-year-old. No reason to be sick, no signs of sickness or symptoms at all. I get rushed into the emergency room and they're like, we don't know what's going on. They thought maybe it was viral meningitis. They did, every test that you can think of, I had. They hit me with like 5 antibiotics and an antiviral. They did all these tests. The only thing that came back as positive was I had a severe sinus infection. They had no idea what was going on. So they're like, well, if there was something in your system, the antibiotics nuked it. That was their term. They're like, we nuked it. It's gone. And then I have been trying to get back onto my feet through diet and nutrition ever since, and trying to re-regulate my body. And that's a whole nother story. I'm now convinced that my inability to recognize how truly stressed out I was and my negative coping mechanisms to that stress was a huge contributor to why my body had such a negative reaction to whatever it was that I had. My idea of a work day was get up before 6 a.m. And just work and continually work and don't stop working. I'm working out, which is action. I'm trying to do all of the work for my job, which is more action. I'm trying to take care of my kids in my house, which is more action. And so there was never a time of where I was taking care of myself. I wasn't recovering. I wasn't paying attention to my body's stress signals. I was just beating my head against the wall constantly. And my body said, we can't do it anymore. And it sent me a very clear signal, which ended me up 5 days in the hospital, right? And I think some of our listeners will probably recognize those patterns if they wanted to sit down and actually think about it. Mm-hmm. Most of us guys don't. We're afraid to look into that introspective. We don't like what we see in the mirror. We know what we're ignoring and pressing down, and we don't have the tools to cope with that. So that's another one of those framework. And then we go into recovery. So sleep, stress, recovery. The idea of recovery is that you have to be able to do things that fill you back up so that you keep doing the things that you need to do. That doesn't necessarily mean sit on the couch and do nothing. Recovery means that you're giving your body the tools that it needs in order to be able to replenish itself. Good sleep leads to good recovery. Good nutrition will lead to good recovery. If you're doing something really, really heavy physically, you can do something that's not so heavy physically that will also return you back to a recovery baseline. I don't know how many runners we have listening to this podcast, but you could go do a long run. Let's say you're training for a marathon, and you're running 12, 13 miles, 15 miles to get ready. Well, one of the things that you do the next couple of days is to do something like a recovery run, just a few short miles. Maybe that's just time, not at a specific pace, but just getting your heart rate going and moving, getting your body moving in general, but not to such a deficit that you're just beating your head against the wall, aids in recovery. Things like that. So that's one framework that I use with my clients because it gets us a lot of really fast, hey, these are the 3 things that we're trying to work on, and it gets them to where they need to go quickly. And then we can work on the other framework long term. My other framework is something called Deep Health. It's very similar to New Start. Again, it comes from Precision Nutrition. Precision Nutrition is a company based out of Canada. I have several certifications from them, and they have one called Deep Health. It's a term that they've coined, and it's 6 different sections that are all connected. One of them would be your nutritional health. One of them be your relationship health and how you deal with other people in your life. One of them is in your environment. If you have a negative environment or an environment that does not promote your health, maybe that's bad water. Maybe that's not a safe living condition. Maybe it's too much noise or air or light pollution, which is causing you not to be able to have good health. Something like that. So your environment is one of those keys. Movement and exercise is one of those keys as well. Then there's emotional. And then the last one is existential or spiritual. All of those pieces connect to make a healthy version of you. Well, if one of those things, I like the term to be on fire. Let's say that's your diet. You're eating whatever. You're on the see it diet. If you see it, you're going to eat it.
Seafood.
Yeah, the seafood diet. If you're on that diet and it's making you overweight, it's not giving your body what it needs in order to be able to be healthy and recovered. Well, that portion of your diet is now on fire. Well, fire itself spreads, which means the things that are next to it are most likely going to also be on fire. You can't be whole if one of those pieces are on fire. So the framework that I set up is all habit-based. We do an intake. We figure out, okay, based off of these pillars, let's see what coping skills you have. Let's see how well these pillars are doing within your life. And those questions and that intake assessment kind of outline, well, you're doing really well in these categories, but you're doing very poorly in these categories. It'll usually highlight which one of those is the poorest. And then we work on trying to bring that poorest category up to an average based off of habit-based learning. It's not a quick fix. Nothing, I think you mentioned this earlier. There's nothing in life that has a fast track. Usually it's because whatever you get to that is a shortcut or a fast track tends to make things worse in the long run because there's no decent foundation for you to be able to build off of. It's just you now have some sort of new skill without any way of being able to keep it up. And then it just makes the fire worse in the end, right? So those are the 2 frameworks that I use with 100% of my clients.
Man, we could learn a lot from Keven for sure. I really like this topic. The stress, sleep, recovery. I don't know if I got that all right, but I feel like one of the most needed messages in today's world is central to our Seventh-day Adventist faith, and that is Sabbath, and how that is something that God put in place even before there was sin, which is really kind of a genius thing either God was saying, I know you're going to need this, or it's just part of the rhythm of even just doing life in the best way possible, which I think is true. And I think sometimes we can be as busy on Sabbath as we can on other days. We have to guard against that. But even I want to ask a question about that's related to this Sabbath principle, this rest principle. Not sure really where to ask about this, but I think that the concept is something we can experience on a micro scale, micro Sabbath, you might say. How do we, even like in meditation or having our time with God, the beginning of the day, I know we, Grant Graves and we put together a book, Morning Summit, which is really zeroing in on this core strength, mental, physical, and spiritual health, and how getting our mind right and our body right, kind of moving at the beginning of the day, and hopefully having a good night's sleep beforehand. Everything kind of comes together in the morning. Do you find that that integration of rest in all three of those areas is something that I don't know where I'm at, what I'm asking, but do you see that?
Hey, I think I know. I think I know how to ask this, Marty.
Okay, you ask it. Go for it, Mike.
In all of your frameworks, where does rest fit in?
Well, I mean, it kind of went over that a little bit.
Yeah,
I know. I'm just saying, where does sleep? Yes, I hear that with you, Marty. I just not just the nightly rest. Go ahead.
Because everything is so connected, I feel like there's small little elements of rest and recovery in all of the, in the entire framework. So I'm going to try to answer this question as concisely as I can. I wish that I had the exact quote, but I remember hearing this quote. I wish I said that I read it because I think that would sound smarter, but I didn't read it. I heard it from somewhere. That those who work during the week with their mind need to rest with something physical on the Sabbath. And those who work with their bodies during the week need to rest with their minds on the Sabbath. I think that in concept is extremely important when we try to narrow down rest. So I'll give you a couple examples. You have someone who is in my position. You've got the dad who's got kids, got a job, very, very active, right? He's got to take care of their marriage, got to take care of the family dog, got to take care of the kids, got to take care of work. And so from the moment he wakes up until the moment he goes to bed, there's always something to do. Very physical, very active, right? The moment that the sun goes down on Friday night, it's just like, thank you. I have 24 hours of nothing. Like the most craved possession is that nap that you get to have after church on Saturday, right? Because it's the excuse. You get to actually physically take a rest on Saturday, right? And because there's so much demanded of you during that 24-hour period of time, the physical rest is what your body's craving.
Right.
Well, then flip the script. You have someone who doesn't have that responsibility, doesn't have that draw. I think of what life was like for me when I was in college. I had a bunch of things that I was trying to learn. I was trying to study, right? I was mentally exhausted, but I was so deprived of getting outside and moving and doing things with my friends and just going out and being. My Saturdays looked completely different when I was in college than they do now that I'm an adult with all of these adult responsibilities. And so I think this kind of brings down into each individual need for rest. If I am someone or an individual who is highly physically active, I am going to need to keep my body moving, but those movements are going to be they're going to look different depending on the load. So someone who is a weightlifter or doing things that are very, very physical, my recovery could look like walking. It could look like doing some form of mobility drill or yoga style movement where I'm allowing my body to move without that heavy workload. If I'm someone who is working at a desk, my recovery may simply look like any movement outside away from a screen that does not take any sort of thought or action, mindless. I can just go for a walk because now I'm getting fresh air. My eyes are now able to look outside and get sunlight, and I'm not secluded into a screen. Right. But now I'm in an upright position. I'm moving. My body is able to, but I'm not, sprinting outside. I'm not overdoing it, but my body is able to recover from this stress that's constant when I'm sitting in front of my computer. It's action in both of those ideas, but it's recovered action. So the term of rest, I think, is not an absolute term of sit and do nothing. Because if you just sit and do nothing all the time, that's going to cause stress to your body as well. That whole concept of like sitting and doing nothing on the couch, that's doing just as much harm and causing your body stress because it's just sitting in these cramped positions for long hours at a time. And the systems that are designed to keep you healthy, they need and require your body to move. So that idea of rest fits in all facets of that. There needs to be certain versions that allow those systems and those spaces within deep health to rest and to recover. I hope that wasn't too cryptic of a way of answering your question, but there are different definitions of rest for each person depending on what their individual lifestyle looks like. And there's definite ways of finding it. It just doesn't always mean to sit and do nothing.
I think that's helpful because maybe somebody's listening to this and they only understood rest in one way, sitting in front of a TV. And then you just helped us understand that and expand that, yes, rest and recovery happens depending on your day-to-day habits and lifestyle. So somebody's rest can be different. And that's even the Sabbath rest each week can be different in that sense. You're right. I love that quote. I hope we can find it somewhere. I'm going to make sure I capture it and go back and listen and write it down.
Please do.
That was good.
Yeah. I feel like as we wrap up, I have been struck that in the plan of redemption and also in the creation of the world, the first full day with man, God, Adam and Eve, started with rest. The first full day was a day of rest. And so I see that God, he starts with rest. He starts with our relationship with rest. It's not, coming to me and now we're going to slave together, and you're going to work really hard and be a good boy and, then I'll love you. It's like, no, just come the way you are and, get yoked up with me and it's going to work better that way. But that whole restful mindset is so counter to the world, Keven. It's a message worth sharing with everybody, but I needed to hear this, and it's a struggle, I think, for all of us, but it's critical.
Yeah, sure.
One of my favorite lines in one of my favorite books, Steps to Christ, is a life in Christ is a life of restfulness, and it's not a life of inaction. It's not a life of sitting around doing nothing. I think, that well-being of the whole person includes being that man of I can sit and not stress or worry about things. I can let Jesus take care of it. It really gets magnified for me on the Sabbath, but it's like, we can have that mini Sabbath rest throughout the week where we just take a deep breath, have that quiet time with God, but then know that he's going to still take care of us. He can't do our exercise for us like our bodies exercise, but we make the choice to take that rest. And I think this is a good place to kind of land this in terms of let's make sure we balance our lives out, guys, with enough of this wellness that Kevin's offering, and but also take the rest and don't just keep going at it all the time. So really appreciate all of your insights, Keven. I'm sure you've got a lot more you can share. You should start your own podcast. That would be, you can go as long as you want. But meanwhile,
I'm a talker. I need someone to cut me off.
Well, you have a lot to share, Keven. I've always found you to be, there's some people who just talk and they get done and you go, what did he just say? But I never feel that way with you. you have very specific things to share, and guys need that. And so thank you for being part of this interview. And I just promise you this won't be your last. We'll be getting you on other times. And I know I was thinking of my son coming up with the next section after wellness and fitness is our relationships, So starting with marriage and then with children and then with, the circle that goes beyond that. But relationships are just so critical in how I know my son, I admire him. He's a busy guy, but a lot of Sabbaths, he just is saying, I'm intentionally just putting the foot down. We're not going anywhere. We're going to stay home. We're going to be. And man, that it almost takes more tenacity to do that than anything in today's world.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, Keven, I know that you could probably speak to that. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I think I struggle with a lot, I don't know if maybe this is just kind of my upbringing of, change is really, really difficult, right? Once it works, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But, kids, they change on such a rapid pace.
For sure.
The moment you think you've got your schedule or your routine figured out, they change. And now you're completely lost again. And so I think one of the struggles as a man is to figure out how to keep up with this rapid course of change and truly know how to be able to put up those boundaries for your family. Because several months of it might be, hey, we're not going to do anything as a family. We're just going to stay, we're going to do these things and we're going to protect that. And then what seems like a moment later, the most important thing for your family is we need to get out and do this, or we need to invite people into our home and open our doors up when all you want to do is rest at home and keep the doors closed. It's to invite other families in and get that level of fellowship with them and, live life alongside of other families.
Amen.
And I mean, yeah. And it seems to change so rapidly. You can't keep your head buried in the sand. One of the things that I struggle with long-term is the need for distraction. It is so much easier for me to be distracted and, listen to music or throw a show up on some streaming platform and then, just kind of go about my day and not have to think about what's coming or think about what happened or to, talk about things that are affecting me or how my kids are really doing. It's easier to avoid it and then just let things happen and deal with it later. And I think for me, when I have gotten into those positions, it has definitely caused a lot more stress and a lot more harm in the people that I care about. And so it's better for me to take the active role of being present and paying attention, which is a daily struggle. It's super hard for me. But one of the things that I have noticed is that when I don't sleep, when I don't rest, when I'm not moving, when I'm not eating well, I don't have the presence of mind or the ability, the physical or mental fortitude to do that job.
Right.
The only thing I can do is to be distracted. And so I think that's one thing that I've found through my own life experience. In order to be able to get ahead of that for your family, to make the decisions for your family, for my family, is to take care of my spiritual, physical, and mental self. And I'm definitely in no means there. I have not made it. I think I come from a position of a disciple where I'm still working on trying to figure all of that out. In no way am I the person who has made it. I'm writing the book and I'm trying to bring people to where I currently am. I'm more of just, I'm on the journey and I'd love for people to come and walk along with me.
Cool.
And that to me is hugely what we're about with Blueprint for Men. And you just did a perfect segue into, here's another just plug, you guys, to join any one of our small groups that are out there, our disciple groups. We want guys to be going and not just doing life, but talking about life. And, these things that are happening in our life, find some other guys to do that with. And we are constantly inviting you to do that here at Blueprint for Men. We want you to know that we've got groups and group leaders who are willing to help take you along that journey in a gentle but loving and encouraging and accountable way. So
Yep.
I want to make sure that we offer that too. So as we finish up though, Keven, tell us, how can guys get a hold of you? You do fitness or wellness coaching, and I want to I've had to ask this through especially the mental health piece of our podcast. You can coach anybody anywhere geographically. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Like with therapists, it has to be within like the state or something like that. But you're not limited to that sense. Okay.
I'm currently not limited. So I have the capacity to do what it is that I do across the United States. Technically, I can do it worldwide. I'm sure that there's a couple things in there that I probably would have to research to ensure that is a 100% accurate statement. But I am licensed to do what it is that I do throughout the continental United States. So it's all digital product that I do. I think that the proper definition would be a little bit more like consulting.
Right.
People come to me. We go through some questions. I ask a lot of questions and try to figure out exactly what's going on. I help you figure out, this is where you are. This is where you want to be, right? We figure out the problem that we're trying to solve, or we figure out the goal and the distance where we want to be, the type of person that you want to be, or the type of health related thing that you're trying to accomplish. And then we set up a plan of how to get there. And as we're developing that plan, obstacles tend to start piling up. And my job as a wellness coach is to come alongside of you and give you perspective on how to be able to overcome that obstacle. The tools that I use are all habit-based. I help you implement small habits that lead to big success. That's one of Dr. John Berardi's terms. He's the owner and starter of Precision Nutrition. It's not about these massive changes, overhaul your life. No, start with one small thing, master that one small thing. And if you can do multiple small little things over time, before you even realize it, you're over halfway to your goal without having this crazy life-altering, having to gut everything and stop certain things cold turkey. So that's what it is that I do. I do not like telling people what to do. That's not my thing, because I don't work and operate that way. If you come in and say, Keven, this is what you got to do, my natural inclination is to go the opposite direction.
Right.
I don't like being told what to do. I want to figure things out myself. And so I try to come alongside my clients, ask a lot of questions. Ultimately, the client gets to make all the decisions. You're in the driver's seat. I'm riding shotgun with you, and I have the map out, and I'm giving you the different route options, and you get to choose the speed and, in some cases, the direction that it takes to get to where it is that you want to go.
Very good. So how do people get a hold of you? How do people find you?
Yeah. So I have a website, kbcoaching.net. You can access pretty much everything about me on that website. And there's also a place where you can set up a free consultation on the website. You can reach out directly to me via email. So that's kcoach@kbcoaching.net. Or feel free to call me, my cell phone number as well, which is my business number. So 320-267-1166. Any of those three ways is an open for you guys to contact. Right now, I am doing free consultations. The consultations are scheduled for roughly 25, 30 minutes, but there's no real cap on that consultation. It can be as short or as long as you really need it to be. There's no charge for asking questions, being curious, and trying to find information.
Nice. Well, we'll make sure to put all of that in our show notes for people to get in touch with if they want to reach out to you with some of those questions and see if you can point them in the right direction. So thank you again, Keven, and thank you, Marty. And we appreciate everybody who listens to this. We do ask, if you can, go please rate and review this podcast. We want to know how we can improve. And at the bottom of all of our show notes, at least, we have somewhere in there a text option. So we want to eventually have an episode where we ask Marty any question. So we got to get that out there. And so whatever question you have for Marty, try to stump Marty. So I want to have an episode where we just have Marty answering questions. So please send that to us as well. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And thank you again, Keven, for your expertise and your glimpse into your world. You guys take care.
My pleasure. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity. This was great.
Thank you.
See you, Kevin.